Randy Waltz, Norte County's appointed sheriff, is now facing felony charges, including allegations of filing false voter registration and false nomination papers in connection with his efforts to be elected sheriff in June. According to Jessica St. R. Andrews, in her complaint filed Wednesday in Norte County Superior Court, District Attorney Catherine Mix said Waltz knowingly committed perjury on or about February 8th by listing a false address on his California voter registration form. Waltz unlawfully registered to vote on February 8th in Norte County, knowing he is not entitled to registration, Mix's complaint states, and submitted nomination papers or declared his candidacy for sheriff on February 14th, quote, falsely stating he met the residency requirements, end quote. On Friday, KFUG Community News spoke with Norte County Supervisor Valerie Starkey about the latest developments and allegations regarding Sheriff Waltz, what this may mean for the Norte County Sheriff's Office as a whole, and how the potential repeal of the Measure R tax funding scheme could affect the situation with law enforcement in Norte County. And we're joined by Norte County Supervisor Valerie Starkey. Supervisor Starkey, once again, Norte County's County Sheriff's Department is in the news, this time with Norte County Sheriff Randy Waltz being charged with at least one, if not multiple felonies. Can you explain to us what's going on here from your perspective?
Yeah, well, thank you again, Mike, for having me. You kind of know as much as I know as far as what's been announced with the felony complaint that was filed and then the information that's been in the news organizations. So that's for really, honestly, I know as much as you do with regard to that.
Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Well, if you think that I have like any scoop, I really don't. Unfortunately, I just know that this was presented to us, and so we did have a heads up it was coming, but it's we don't have much more knowledge than the general public does about it.
Well, and as I understand it, it basically boils down to using a fictitious address in order to both register to vote and file candidacy papers for the county sheriff's election. Is that basically it?
That's what the complaint says.
So you said that you had a heads up on this as members of the Board of Supervisors. When did you become aware of this?
The board was told Tuesday morning. I know I was contacted earlier by phone just to get some more information about perhaps conversations, but I can't really speak to that because of the ongoing investigation. But the board was told Tuesday morning. I don't know when the other board members were told, if before that. I was out Tuesday, unfortunately, due to a medical condition, so I wasn't at the meeting when the board members were told.
Well, first off, let me say I hope everything is going well for you and that you're doing okay. I have a couple of questions. So the rest of the members of the Norte County Board of Supervisors really moved forward very quickly with appointing Randy Waltz as sheriff. You were the only supervisor who said, well, we should sort of wait a little bit and let the process play out. Let me get your thoughts about that in retrospect, and to the degree you can, if you've had any conversation with other supervisors about that.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy. So, yes, in September when it was brought before us, I provided a different alternative. And ultimately, the board made a decision to appoint the sheriff that day. And I'm going to tell you, even though it wasn't the way I would have gone or the vote that I cast, even once it became a board decision, this is now a board decision. So I do stand behind it. I do, that's just how sometimes the cookie crumbles, so to speak, is that you do your best to voice your opinion and have it go a certain direction. And when it doesn't, and then the board has made a decision. It became a board decision. So I do support it, even if I did voice my opposition to it. Once it became a decision that we made as a board, that's what I stand by.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that and appreciate you being a good team player with all of this. And at the same time, though, you were the only supervisor to say, well, wait a minute, why don't we do a little bit more investigation? I remember you specifically saying that you thought that Randy Waltz may indeed turn out to be the perfect candidate. It wasn't that you were opposed to him, you were just opposed to the process being moved forward so quickly.
Right. And I guess what my thought process was back then, and it still will be this way now, if it gets to the point that we need to appoint somebody to replace the appointment. But my thought process is that I want to be transparent. I want the public to see a very transparent process. And it's not that Randy wasn't going to be the best person for the job. He still could very well be. I don't know. These are allegations, but nothing is done until it's done. But I want the public to watch the entire process as it unfolds. So if that means, having them apply, their applications become public documents, the interview process is a very public process. That's what I want to see happen, only because they're elected officials. The public really needs to know who is in those roles so that they can see it's transparent. They know exactly, the decisions, the reasoning for the decisions are all out in the open and discussed. And I'm just a big believer in that. And so that's why I wanted to see it the way I wanted to see it was, again, open it up. Maybe Randy was going to be the only one who applied, or maybe Randy and 4 other people were going to apply, and Randy would have still been the best candidate. I don't know. But I just felt it needed to be a lot more public and transparent.
Well, I think that certainly has proven to be what was necessary. And you're right. We don't know what the actual disposition of this case is going to be. And as has been said many, many times, innocent until they're proven guilty. And so that will all play out in a court of law. My understanding is that Mr. Waltz, is Mr. Waltz still sheriff at this moment?
At this moment, yes.
He still remains sheriff. Okay. And then let me ask you this, because it was stated that the county was handling this as a personnel matter. And I'm trying to get a little bit more of a handle on that. I mean, on the one hand, we have a sheriff who's allegedly committed a crime, who is charged with committing a crime. And at the same time, it's being handled as a personnel matter by the county. Can you explain that?
Well, I can't, and I won't divulge a bunch of information that I can't. But what I can say is that, the position itself is just not something that we can say, all right, hand in your badge and your gun, you're done. It's an appointed position, which is really an elected position. And so there's other steps that need to be taken. And so I believe the county is pursuing those steps.
Then let me move to this, because this issue that has happened with the current sheriff, Randy Waltz, has once again brought to the fore because of the updated article that has been published by the Sacramento Bee to what appears to be some pretty serious and chronic problems in the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office. And I mean, I don't want to go over the issues of the alleged abuse of jail inmate or inmates or improprieties that deputies may or may not have engaged in with explorers. I'm particularly looking at the statement in the Bee article that some 24 employees of the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department have left the department since 2020. That seems to say that there's a lot of problems in the department, chronic problems. And what, if anything, can the Del Norte County Board of Supervisors do about that?
Well, I just want to, for clarification now, I started in 2021, so there's a whole year that might have gone by without me knowing it.
Right.
Happened. And so from 2021 to now, I can tell you that I think that it's stabilized over there. And the reason why is that we were very fortunate to have Measure R pass. When Measure R passed, we were focused on law enforcement. We were focused on what we can do to retain the employees that we have, and how can we go out and advocate to get qualified and great employees. And so we were able to do that by raising the salaries over there. We were able to add positions over there. When you're overworked and understaffed, it is a very difficult environment. So the Measure R monies that have come in have been such a life raft to the Sheriff's Department with that respect. Now, I don't know of what their staffing chart is as of now, but I'll tell you, I haven't been contacted as frequently as I was in January of 2021 with regard to the help that they needed, because we have tried to resolve some of those issues.
I'd like to get back to the Sheriff's Department in just a moment, but you have raised the issue of Measure R. And as we all know, and as KFUG has reported on recently, there's an effort to repeal Measure R that is, unless something changes radically, going to be on the November ballot. Is Measure R what it's actually going to take in order to get to a level of competency in the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office and maintain that?
I will advocate for Measure R as often and as frequently as I can. I know the same words, often and frequent. But Measure R is not only applied to the Sheriff's Department, it's provided better medical services for the inmates in that jail. And it's such a turnaround in the amount of treatment that they've been getting in the jail, both mental health wise and physical. And so that has been helpful. Measure R has helped with animal services. We're able to now hire an animal control supervisor, who then can kind of maintain and manage what's going on over at animal services, which is a very overworked department. Oftentimes they have somewhere between 30 and 35 dogs a day at the kennel. And that's a lot of dogs to have to feed and clean and bathe and walk. And so we're able to use the Measure R funding for that. I could go on, and I will be going on and on about the benefits of Measure R as time goes on. So with regard to the Sheriff's Department, it has been an amazing amount of help, because we were able to hire an extra dispatcher and extra records clerk, and we got the employees up to a living wage comparable to other counties. I still think they're probably underpaid over in the big scope of things, but at least it's a competitive salary for other agencies that are within our proximity. So I believe it's helped, and I will continue to advocate strongly to keep Measure R in place, because it's going to provide those services to this community that we desperately need.
So going back to Mr. Waltz being appointed, Sheriff Waltz, because he is still sheriff, being appointed, I specifically remember Supervisor Howard saying that one of the reasons that he was in favor of appointing Randy Waltz was because Randy Waltz was in essence an outsider and not part of, as I believe he put it, the existing factions within the Del Norte County Sheriff's Department. Do you remember it being said that way as well?
I've rewatched the meeting, so yes, I do recall it.
So here we are now, right before the beginning of the election season. I mean, you're not saying this, I'm saying this. I think for all intents and purposes, regardless of whether Randy Waltz is guilty or not guilty, his chances of becoming Del Norte County Sheriff are pretty slim to none. That's my analysis. I'm not saying you think that or think any other way. And if you do, that's fine. I'd love to hear it. So as best as I can understand it, we are going to be in a position in Del Norte County where one of the people running for the office is a longtime member of the Crescent City Police Department. Another person who is supposedly running for the office, at least has been campaigning, is Sergeant Ortega, who's been with the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office 15 years. So if needing somebody from the outside was crucial, and the reason, at least for some of the supervisors, or one of the supervisors, to advocate for Sheriff Walz, what does it say if we wind up with somebody who's not an outsider, in fact, somebody who's been part of the department for many years?
Yeah, that's a question for Supervisor Howard. I mean, I think that whenever we're looking for the best person for the job, we got to take everything out of it, right? Whether they've been here long term or not long term. Sometimes that may apply, right? If we want somebody that is going to be a travel agent for our area, we want somebody that really knows Crescent City and that's been here long term. But, I don't necessarily think that's a qualification. I think Supervisor Howard was providing a justification of why he felt at the time this could be a good idea. But I can't put words in his mouth. You would have to ask him directly.
Yeah, and I'm certainly not trying to I'm not trying to set up something between you and Supervisor Howard. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if the need was to get somebody who wasn't part of the culture in there to change the culture, now that seems like it's pretty much off the table. And we're going to have the likelihood of somebody who's deeply involved in the law enforcement culture in Del Norte County, if not the Del Norte County Sheriff's Office itself. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah, and I totally get where you're going with that. And I'll just say that, just because people pull papers doesn't mean that they return the papers.
Right.
So we won't know until 5 o'clock today who's running for sheriff. If Sergeant Ortega, who is a very honorable man, very humble, and with a lot of integrity, and I don't know Mr. Scott, but everything I've read about him seems that he has, amazing support and nothing but good things to say about him. And then, Sheriff Walz, has other qualities that are very good. I mean, he seems to be well received with the members of the Sheriff's Department. So we potentially could have 3 candidates. I don't know if we are going to or not.
Well, and that leads me to another question. I'll just ask you what you think, and you can tell me whatever you want to tell me, right? Okay. I mean, so here we are right when the election's getting ready to start, and all of a sudden, bam, felony charges against the incumbent sitting sheriff right before an election season. Now, I don't know whether he's guilty of these charges, he's not guilty of these charges. The timing of it all just seems a little suspect to me.
See, and I somebody else had said that too. And is it because you can't? I mean, I don't know if he did what he did or not. And I am not the judge and jury on this one.
Thank God, right?
Exactly. But I don't. The timing is not. Is it really? Because I think when you file papers, you have to sign something. So you can't file papers until it's open up to file it. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I think that it's some sort of like conspiracy. I don't know though. I mean, I honestly, I know as much as you do, but as far as the timing goes, you can't file papers until February 14th or whenever it is. I don't know. I think it was February. And so that perhaps is the day that they can start any kind of investigate. I don't know though. I'm walking myself into a hole here, but I'm just saying I don't know necessarily that it's some sort of suspect conspiracy thing.
Yeah, no, I actually, the way you explain it there makes a lot of sense, because you can't be legally in violation of something until your name is on a piece of paper stating that whatever you're stating isn't true. And if those papers weren't due until just recently, it makes sense. I hadn't thought of it quite that way. So, I mean, that's certainly one viable possibility.
Yeah. I don't know, the whole thing. I feel for him. I feel for the department. I mean, none of this feels great, right? And as you know, I spent my career helping people change their life around, and not looking at the negative and trying to find whatever positive in them to help them go the different direction. And we're not even there yet for him. And so, but I just know that this has got to be somewhat of a struggle, and I do feel for him. to be put in this position, whether he put himself in that position or not.
So, two final questions. One being, since both of the candidates who are running, well, who are at least purporting to be running for Del Norte County Sheriffs, other than Sheriff Waltz, both have made statements, both have been interviewed by a former supervisor, and both have made statements, one directly and one paraphrasing, that law enforcement is under siege. Is law enforcement under siege in this community?
Well, that is just such a hot topic, isn't it? And I'm going to say that it's hard, right? Because from an outsider looking in, and I know my love for law enforcement, and I was raised by a highway patrolman. I spent 30 years in law enforcement, and then I come to I come back to this community after lived in Sonoma County, and I have nothing but love, and I see nothing but love for our law enforcement. So that is a hard one for me to answer because I don't see it. I would want to know from law enforcement if they felt that they are law enforcement, right? Not law enforcement as a global type thing, but our law enforcement. And if they felt under siege, I would certainly that would be something I want to focus on to correct. Like, what can we do as a community to know that you're valued and you're important and that we trust and we rely upon you? So I know that didn't answer your question at all, but that's just really how I feel.
No, I think it actually did answer the question. I see, part of it for me is that, I mean, I understand being a law enforcement officer is an incredibly hard job. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't want to do it. You couldn't pay me enough money to do it. And at the same time, I think that if a law enforcement agency, and I'm not saying this one does, has a kind of a bunker mentality, we're under siege, it's us against them, I think that can tend to have real negative consequences for the community, which is why I raised it.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely an interesting question. I would want to have like a workshop or something and let them come forward and tell us how they feel, and then go from there. I just don't want to put words in their mouth because I've not heard from anyone. I try and keep my lines of communication open with anybody that wants to communicate with me, and I talk with deputies and with Crescent City PD, and I've not heard them say that, but that doesn't mean they don't feel it. So if they do, I certainly want to take steps to rectify that.
Is it time to have some sort of public discussion about law enforcement in Del Norte County? And what I mean is really, because for completely different reasons than I would have raised, one of the leaders of the repeal Measure R effort made some accusations about the sheriff and the sheriff's department at the last board meeting. And you weren't there, so this is unfair, and I apologize for that.
Oh, I watched it.
Yeah. So, and then we have all of these other allegations that are being printed by, the Sacramento Bee. And these are very, very different parts and aspects of this community. Is it time to have some kind of public, I don't mean like airing of dirty laundry, but something that can rekindle real faith, not just for the public in our local law enforcement, but also for law enforcement to be able to have an opportunity to let the public know these are the things that we deal with, and these are the areas we need your help.
I think it's a fabulous idea. And I'm going to tell you that when you're a cop and you're not entitled to have a bad day, right? You're not entitled to have your kids screaming as you're walking out the door and, knowing that you have to do this after work. Because if you do, and you don't, you say something that's a little curt, or you say something wrong, you get really attacked. And I get it. I get you have to put on this whole uniform as well as like this cloak of courtesy, and that's how it should be. But I think that we need to give them a little bit of grace, that they can have bad days too. And a workshop or something that where we can just, and I agree that let's not air our dirty laundry, but at the same time, let's stop pretending that everything's perfect. Let's stop, having this like, oh, well, of course we didn't do that because we're not human and we don't make mistakes. Well, yes, you do. And tell us, what can we do to support you? And that could be more deputies. It could be whatever that it is that they need. And it's more compassion for the job itself. I mean, it's a tough job. And they're running into dangerous situation while people are running out. And that is a huge responsibility. So I think that some sort of public forum to have this discussion, I always think that's a good thing. I'm all for transparency. I'm all for let's just get it out there. And then that's our starting point. That's where we now say, okay, what can we do to improve it? Because ultimately, that's everybody's goal here. That's the people who want to repeal Measure R. That's the people who want to keep Measure R. That's the law enforcement officers that are working. That's the ones that are quitting. We all want what's best for Del Norte County. That's really, and I believe that with my heart of hearts. And so how do we get there? And how do we get there together?
Del Norte County Supervisor Valerie Starkey, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Mike, for having me anytime.